When Apple engineers were first developing the Newton message pad back in the early 90s, they stumbled onto this statistical anomaly. It honestly completely changed how they approached the software.
Oh, right, the vocabulary data. That is such a wild story to start with.
Yeah, exactly. They realized that a user only needs like 0.01% of their total vocabulary to accomplish 50% of the tasks they want to do on a handheld device. And
Yeah.
think about the implications of that for a second. We're taught from childhood that the world operates on this very neat, predictable system of fairness and, symmetry.
Right, the whole balanced scale concept. You put a pound of effort in on one side, you get a pound of results out on the other. It is the ultimate linear illusion. I like to call it the 50-50
The
fallacy.
50-50 fallacy, I love that.
Yeah, because we just project that expectation onto everything, don't we? We assume all our clients hold roughly equal value, or all our products contribute evenly to the bottom line. We even think every hour in our workday is equally productive.
Which feels safe, right? Viewing the world as this symmetrical engine where inputs always match outputs. But the sources we're diving into today prove that scale is just completely rigged.
Oh, absolutely rigged. You could walk up to it, put a feather on one side, and suddenly a massive iron weight goes flying into the air on the other.
Exactly. So whether you're prepping to overhaul your corporate strategy or trying to reclaim your personal time, or you're just intensely curious about the hidden architecture of the universe, this deep dive is going to fundamentally shatter that illusion of balance.
We are pulling apart Richard Koch's foundational book, The 80-20 Principle, The Secret to Achieving More with Less.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore why the universe is predictably, almost aggressively unbalanced. We want to show you how identifying the vital few over the trivial many can just totally multiply your effectiveness.
It is such a crucial concept to grasp for everyday life.
Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly is the 80-20 principle? And why is it considered the best-kept secret of highly effective people and corporations? Because on the surface, the idea that a tiny fraction of your effort drives almost all your results sounds a bit like, I don't know, corporate mysticism.
I get that, but it's entirely grounded in mathematics. Though, it took us a surprisingly long time to notice it. To understand why our modern lives are governed by this extreme imbalance, we actually have to trace the discovery back to 1897.
Wow, okay, over a century ago.
Yeah. There was this Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto. He was studying patterns of wealth and income in England. And he wasn't just looking for simple inequality, he was looking for structural predictability.
See, I always assumed Pareto just pointed out that the rich get richer, which, isn't exactly a groundbreaking revelation.
Right, but looking at the source text, he actually identified a mathematical constant. He mapped this precise recurring curve. Pareto discovered that a minority of the population consistently held the vast majority of the wealth, roughly 20% of the people controlling 80% of the money.
Hence the 80-20 name.
Exactly. But the truly paradigm-shifting part of his research was that this exact same mathematical relationship repeated itself across totally different centuries and entirely different countries.
Wait, really? So it wasn't just an England thing?
Not at all. He would look at a completely different society with a totally different government, and that identical, highly skewed distribution curve would just appear again. It was a structural law of nature, not some localized economic fluke.
Now, that leads from economics into human behavior pretty quickly, too. Because George K. Ziff at Harvard took Pareto's curve in 1949 and actually applied it to our daily habits. He framed it as the principle of least effort.
Oh, Zipf's research is fascinating. It showed that resources, whether we're talking about human energy or time or even physical skills, they naturally arrange themselves to minimize work.
Yeah, like when he analyzed marriage licenses in a 20-block area of Philadelphia in 1931, he found that 70% of marriages occurred between people who lived within just 30% of the distance of each other.
That is so funny. The human organism acts to conserve energy. Basically, people were finding their life partners by optimizing for a shorter commute.
Exactly. And Zip applied that same principle to the workplace, which I absolutely love. He famously provided a scientific justification for having a cluttered desk.
Oh, the file folder example.
Yes, he pointed out that frequency of use naturally draws physical objects closer to our immediate reach. So like a highly intelligent secretary under Zip's framework deliberately avoids filing the folders they use most often.
Right, leaving them piled on the desk isn't sloppy at all. It's actually a physical manifestation of the 80-20 rule. It recognizes that 20% of the files account for 80% of the daily workflow.
I am absolutely using the principle of least effort the next time someone complains about my workspace.
Mhm.
But framing it as a law of nature brings up a pretty crucial question.
Which is,
Well, if everything from wealth distribution to marriage proximity to the physical location of manila folders naturally clumps together into these heavy concentrations, does this mean fairness? Or a 50-50 balance is basically fighting gravity?
if we connect this to the bigger picture, a 50-50 balance actually requires immense artificial energy to maintain. The 80-20 principle is deeply tethered to chaos theory.
Chaos theory. How so?
Well, we like to think of the universe as a linear system, but it's deeply nonlinear. In a perfectly balanced theoretical vacuum without feedback loops, sure, causes and effects might behave symmetrically, but nature operates on compounding positive and negative feedback loops.
Oh, like the goldfish pond example from the text. That illustrates this perfectly.
Yes, go ahead and explain that one.
So you can stock a pond with 100 goldfish of almost identical size, right? And you assume they'll all grow at roughly the same rate given the exact same environment. But they don't.
Because of the slight variations.
Exactly. The fish with just fractionally bigger mouths capture a slightly disproportionate amount of the food. That tiny advantage creates this massive positive feedback loop. A slightly bigger mouth means more calories, which fuels faster body growth, which then creates an even bigger mouth.
Right. And within a short period, the pond isn't full of average-sized fish anymore. It's dominated by a few massive outliers and a huge population of stunted fish.
It's wild. And this mechanism of compounding advantage creates a tipping point. We see it in human markets just as clearly as biology, right?
Oh, completely. Consider the film industry. A comprehensive study of 300 movies released over an 18-month window revealed something crazy. A mere 4 movies, which is just 1.3% of the total releases, captured 80% of the box office revenues.
Just 4 movies out of 300, that is insane.
Right. When a movie like Independence Day or Mission Impossible gains a slight early lead in popularity, network effects just take over. Word of mouth creates a cultural mandate to see the film, packing the theaters.
While the remaining 98.7% of films, like Waterworld, just play to empty seats.
Exactly. The 80-20 principle often accelerates into a 991 reality when cultural feedback loops get involved.
It really seems to come down entirely to initial conditions locking in. The sources actually mention the famous clock on the Florence Cathedral from 1442.
Oh, right, the one that moves backward.
Yeah, it moves counterclockwise and displays a full 24-hour cycle. And it wasn't built to be strange or rebellious. It was just built right before the modern clockwise 12-hour standard tipped past 51% dominance in Europe.
That's the tipping point. Once a convention, a species, or a product crosses that 51% threshold, the gravity of the network pulls it rapidly toward 99 or 100% dominance. Equality is highly unstable. It usually resolves into dominance.
And because this imbalance is literally a structural law of physics and sociology, you start to see why it triggered the greatest manufacturing leaps of the 20th century.
Joseph Juran absolutely recognized this when he sparked the quality revolution. He was working as an engineer in the 1920s, and Juran actually coined the phrase rule of the vital few.
What did he observe exactly?
He observed that raising the average quality of a manufacturing line across the board was an incredibly inefficient waste of capital. Instead, he identified that roughly 20% of the manufacturing defects were causing 80% of the total quality losses.
Wow. So the mechanism of improvement wasn't universal effort at all. It was just targeted eradication of those vital few errors.
Exactly. But the wild part is seeing how American industrialists flat out ignored Juran's vital few concept when he pitched it in 1951.
Well, they were riding the post-war economic boom, right? They saw absolutely no reason to fundamentally alter their production philosophy.
Exactly. So Juran had to take his methodology to Japan in 1953. And Japanese corporations immediately grasped the mathematics. By hyper-focusing their capital on fixing just that vital 20% of defects, they transformed their national economy into a powerhouse of high-precision manufacturing.
They nearly dismantled Western dominance in several sectors before the U.S. finally caught on decades later.
Yep. The manufacturing application is profound, but the principle scales flawlessly into the digital age, too.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the information revolution utilized the exact same structural imbalance. In 1963, IBM engineers made a staggering discovery about computation.
Oh, the processing code realization.
Yeah, they realized that a computer spent 80% of its processing time executing just 20% of the operating code.
Because the hardware was wasting immense resources parsing through trivial instructions, IBM took that insight and aggressively rewrote their operating software. They structured the architecture to make that highly utilized 20% of the code incredibly accessible.
And that singular architectural pivot made their machines exponentially more efficient. It completely solidified their market dominance.
But the hardware evolution took it even further with RISC processors, reduced instruction set computing. It is probably the purest technological embodiment of Pareto's curve.
How so?
Well, the mechanism behind RISC is brilliant. Hardware developers realize that software programs spend 80% of their time executing a tiny fraction of the available microprocessor instructions. Instead of building a complex chip that could do everything moderately well, they optimize the physical pathways for that vital 20%.
And just eliminated the vast majority of the other instructions entirely.
Yes, by reducing the instruction set, you physically shrink the silicon. The physical pathways on the chip become shorter, meaning the electrons literally travel less distance. It saves manufacturing costs, reduces thermal throttling, and exponentially multiplies processing speed.
So the limitation itself was the source of the power. That is brilliant. But, knowing how tech giants and Japanese automotive engineers weaponize this principle is great historical context.
Yeah.
But to apply it to daily decisions, the text makes a crucial distinction.
Right. Between 80-20 analysis and 80-20 thinking.
Exactly. Analysis is the rigorous, data-heavy side, right?
Yes. You need clean data for 80-20 analysis. The book illustrates this with a hypothetical group of 100 beer-drinking friends.
Okay, I like where this is going.
If you rigorously track their consumption over a month, you will not find a normal distribution where everyone casually drinks a few pints a week. Line them up on a bar chart by volume, and you will inevitably find a steep Pareto curve. You might see a 70-20 rule, where the top 20 friends consume 70% of the beer, or even an 80-28 rule.
And you'll probably discover that the bottom 20% of those friends might account for a negligible 3% of total consumption.
Exactly. So if you are running a brewery, pouring marketing dollars into convincing that bottom 20% to drink one extra beer a month is a catastrophic waste of capital.
You build your entire business model around catering to the heavy hitters. But, we obviously can't pause life to run spreadsheet analyses on our social circles or our daily habits.
Which necessitates 80-20 thinking. This is the qualitative, intuitive application of the principle. It requires you to constantly survey your environment and identify the underlying architecture of your success.
Which turns conventional wisdom completely upside down. We are so culturally conditioned to raise our average effort across the board, to shore up our weaknesses, and to strive for well-roundedness.
Right, but 80-20 thinking demands that you stop trying to be pretty good at a dozen things. You abandon average effort entirely and only celebrate exceptional productivity.
You actively look for shortcuts. It means aggressively delegating or outsourcing the trivial 80% of your life, whether that's lawn care, basic administrative work, or car maintenance, so you can focus all your cognitive load on your vital few.
It forces a continuous internal audit. You have to evaluate every project and ask, what is the 20% of my exertion here that is actually generating 80% of the value?
Now, I do have to push back on this philosophy slightly.
Oh, how so?
Well, framing life around finding shortcuts and abandoning 80% of your responsibilities sounds, inherently lazy. We are taught to put in 100% effort, 100% of the time. Telling people to drop everything but their top-performing tasks just sounds like a sophisticated excuse to avoid hard work.
What's fascinating here is that ruthlessly cutting the trivial many require significantly more discipline than simply working hard at everything. It is not about laziness, it's about personal allocation.
Allocation in what sense?
Well, the 19th century French economist J.B. Say, who actually coined the term entrepreneur, defined the concept as shifting economic resources out of an area of lower productivity into an area of higher productivity. 80-20 thinking is just the application of entrepreneurship to your own life.
Oh, I see.
It's acknowledging that the vast majority of your busy work is structural waste. Having the courage to abandon tasks that feel urgent but yield nothing is much harder than just blindly grinding through a to-do list. You are freeing up the capital of your time to double down on the powerful 20%.
That makes a lot of sense. And applying that level of personal auditing naturally leads to looking under the hood of the organizations we work for. And when you unleash 80/20 analysis on corporate data, it reveals a terrifying reality about modern business strategy.
Terrifying is the right word. Most organizations are flying completely blind. They rely on sweeping overviews of their market position, looking at gross revenue as the ultimate metric of health.
The Fasters argues strategy shouldn't be an overview at all. It needs to be an underview.
Yeah.
You have to dissect the actual profitability and cash generation of the granular chunks of the operation.
The case study on Electronic Instruments, Inc. is a brutal wake-up call for this.
Oh, the product group breakdown. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. They broke down their massive catalog into product groups. Group A represented a tiny 3% of total sales, but it generated 10% of the company's total profits. When they combined groups A, B, and C, those products accounted for only 20% of gross sales, but they were driving a massive 53% of the actual profits.
But the devastating insight always hides at the bottom of the chart.
Always. Electronic Instruments had this highly visible, high-volume division, Product Group H. It accounted for millions in gross sales. But when the analysts finally allocated the true overhead costs, the warehousing, the support staff, and the administrative drag to that specific group, Product H had a negative 75.3% return.
That's unbelievable. The company was literally subsidizing a massive, complex product line that was actively destroying their margins. And switching the lens from product profitability to customer profitability yields the exact same skewed curve.
You're thinking of the strategy consulting firm data.
Yes. They analyzed their own internal metrics and found that M&A work, mergers and acquisitions, represented only 22% of their total revenues. Yet that specific service accounted for an astonishing 87% of their profits, an 8,722 rule hiding in plain sight.
And the client relationship data was even more polarized. Clients they had retained for more than 3 years represented only 26% of their total business volume, but those specific relationships generated 84% of the firm's profits.
Because long-term clients are exponentially cheaper to service.
Okay.
The trust is established, the communication is streamlined, and you aren't spending capital on acquisition.
Exactly. The firm was actually losing money on brand new clients due to the massive initial friction of onboarding and pitching. This raises an important question, though. Once an executive team sees this data, how should they fundamentally reorganize?
Right, because the instinct is usually just to chop the bottom products or fire the bottom clients. But the text argues for competitive segmentation.
Yes. The concept of carving the business up based on the competitor landscape rather than just the internal product catalog.
Explain how that works in practice.
If you sell 3 different products, but in product A you face a massive multinational conglomerate, and in product B you face local regional startups, the entire structure of the competition changes. The marketing spend required, the pricing leverage you hold, the cost of customer acquisition, all of those variables shift based on the competitor, even if the products look identical on your internal spreadsheet.
Ah, I see.
When Electronic Instruments analyzed their business through this specific lens, they identified 15 distinct competitive segments. The top 6 segments comprised only 26% of total sales, but drove 83% of the profits.
Which brings up the multi-million-dollar question. If the mathematics so clearly demonstrate that 80% of an organization's products, clients, or segments are a financial anchor, why do incredibly smart, highly compensated executives stubbornly refuse to liquidate them?
The hesitation almost universally stems from the overhead myth.
Ah, the overhead myth. The executives look at that unprofitable 80% volume and panic. They argue that the sheer revenue from the trivial many is required to keep the lights on.
Right. They assume that if they cut 80% of their operations, they couldn't possibly shed 80% of their fixed overhead fast enough, which would lead to immediate bankruptcy.
But the text says that's a fundamental misdiagnosis of organizational physics, right?
Exactly. That unprofitable 80% isn't paying for the overhead. It is actively creating the overhead. Chasing top-line growth without ruthless focus breeds lethal internal complexity.
So the complexity is the actual friction dragging down the engine.
Think about the hidden mechanisms of internal complexity. Every time an employee has to put down a standard high-margin task to deal with a bespoke customer request from an unprofitable client, you aren't just losing the 10 minutes it takes to fulfill the request.
You're paying for the cognitive switching cost.
Yes. You are paying for the physical staging of new materials. You are paying for the inevitable gaps when partially completed work is set down to wait for another department's approval, You are paying for the miscommunications that happen across those gaps. That friction slows the entire system down and evaporates profitability.
While the highly profitable 20% of a business usually flows seamlessly and requires almost none of that bespoke overhead.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? It means simplicity is structurally beautiful and highly profitable. If you amputate the complex, unprofitable 80% of an organization, you aren't destroying your foundation. You are eliminating the friction.
You free up the human capital, the physical space, and the cognitive bandwidth to multiply the highly profitable 20%. You can offer faster service, better quality, and lower prices on those vital items, and still vastly increase your margins because the underlying system is finally streamlined.
Is there a company that actually pulled this off successfully?
Oh, absolutely. The Interface Corporation in Georgia executed this flawlessly. They operated in the commercial carpet industry and made this brilliant 80-20 observation. They realized that 20% of a physical carpet receives roughly 80% of the daily wear and tear.
Oh, like the high traffic corridors and walkways?
Right, so instead of manufacturing and selling massive wall-to-wall carpets that eventually get ripped up and thrown into a landfill just because a few narrow walkways are ruined,
Oh, I think I see where this is going.
they fundamentally altered their business model based on that physical asymmetry. They pioneered the leasing of carpet tiles.
Wow, that's so smart.
Yeah, they conduct regular physical inspections of corporate spaces and only replace the vital 20% of tiles that actually absorb the wear. It drastically lowered the material costs for interface, it lowered the life cycle costs for the customer, and it structurally transformed their entire company.
A massive industry disruption, born from a trivial observation about foot traffic. It's really a stunning application of the theory. Let's pull all of this together for you. From Pareto mapping the wealth curves of 19th century Europe, to engineers shrinking the silicon on microprocessors, to the architectural brilliance of carpet tiles, the universe is undeniably wonky. It is mathematically designed to reward a tiny fraction of your inputs with a massive, disproportionate yield.
And while the corporate strategy applications are fascinating, the true value of this deep dive is applying the lens to your own life. The objective is never to just work harder or run faster on the treadmill.
No, the objective is to identify your own personal vital few and ruthlessly, unapologetically minimize the trivial many that consume your energy. That brings us to a final, highly provocative thought drawn straight from the source text. It is something for you to seriously evaluate today.
I love this part.
We all constantly complain that we are desperately short on time. It is the defining anxiety of modern life. But if the 80-20 principle holds true as a structural law, and the data overwhelmingly suggests it does, then 80% of your personal happiness, your deep fulfillment, and your life's actual achievements occur in a tiny 20% fraction of your time.
The implication of that math is staggering. It completely flips the narrative. You aren't starving for time at all. You are actually awash with time and simply profligate in how you abuse the vast majority of it.
So here's the challenge to leave you with. Audit your next 24 hours. Look closely at the friction. What if you deliberately abandoned the 80% of your day that yields almost zero joy or progress and simply doubled your investment in the vital 20%?
You wouldn't be fighting gravity anymore. You'd be using it to launch a massive weight with a single feather.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and keep questioning the balance of your world.